Hello and welcome back to Exploited Crimes and Technology. This is Opal Singleton, and our guest today is Adam Coffran. His organization is Safe Kids, and they're an organization that for many years now have dealt with the public school system in training our kids about active shooters. Adam is a retired law enforcement officer and has over 2 decades of law enforcement experience. And I'm very, very proud to know someone who's taken their level of expertise and put it into the private sector in a way that can actually empower and educate our kids. So with that, Adam, what I'd like to do here is kind of take it into how does all of this work, and what kinds of experience have you had as you try to talk to kids about active shooter?
Kids are, while the percentage or the likelihood that they're going to be involved in one of these events is relatively low. Obviously, right. that ratio has been getting a little bit higher, unfortunately, over the past few years. But we know, all things being equal, it's a fairly low occurrence rate. However, the threats of violence, the propensity of someone to pull a gun or to pull a knife in an incident, to threaten that they have that, we hear stories from parents quite a bit. And, one of the more recent stories was at a soccer game. She had a second grader and a fourth grader, and they're both playing kids soccer. Well, a couple of fields over, 2 parents got in an argument, and one said, well, let me get my gun, and pulled up his waistband. And now obviously the panic ensues, right? Someone's got a gun.
Yeah.
And this was being a couple fields over. And, this mom, she's sitting in the stands and she's watching her kids play. And then you feel the panic, right? You sense what's going on, and she's able to look and see people running and scattering and everyone screaming, run, he's got a gun, run. Well, she was now a fairly good distance away from her kids, and that sense of helplessness of realizing that she couldn't get to her kids through this other massive of crowds of parents running out of the stands and trying to run into the fields. She was able to watch her fourth grader immediately run over to his younger sister, the second grader, watch them, we call it danger running, but essentially kind of run in a bit of a zigzag pattern away from, so that way they're not in a crowd, in a completely opposite direction where most people were going. And where they were running was towards a parking lot behind a set of dumpsters. Uh-huh. And so, the mom eventually is able to kind of weave her way through the crowd and gets over to them. And of course, they're behind the dumpsters and they're looking around, and they're obviously scared. But
right.
As things begin to calm down, the mom's like, what happened? Why are you over here? And they said, well, we learned in school, if something dangerous happens, kind of what to do. And we saw that we knew these dumpsters were safer than everyone just was kind of running all over the place. We knew that we could hide behind them. We knew that we shouldn't run in a crowd because that's not a good idea. And so, the mom is listening to these kids, essentially giving them a tactical plan, so to speak, on how they got out of there. And she goes, honestly, I was going to go with everybody else, but I followed my kids and I was actually safer for it. Uh-huh. And so we see, as these kids start to, the knowledge spills out over the 4 walls of their classrooms or the 4 corners of their Zoom screen, right? It's a life skill that they're taking with them, and they're applying it to different situations depending on what's going on around them.
Yeah, one of the things I'd never really thought about, I'm taking you back to the conversation we had before break, that LA County is taking away 150 of these school resource officers. And they, in addition to being there and listening, they are the ones that reinforce a lot of this positive things. But you can't help but wonder that if you don't have a school resource officer, if you won't see an increase of weapons and violence and threat and that kind of thing, because there's nothing there to deter it.
Yeah, you look at the role that school resource officers play, and I always tell folks, I go, the school resource officer is a very unique officer by their mindset, by their personality, right? They're not that hardened street cop, that's, the Joe Fridays, just the facts type officer. And in fact, many officers, don't kind of fit the mold of being a school resource officer for a variety of reasons. Because those officers are kind of like teachers. They have to be a part counselor and a part social worker, and they have to be, a part deterrent. They have to be a part enforcer. They have to be a part of a little bit of everything. Yeah. And in some communities, they really rely on their school resource officers for a variety of things. And it almost seems that the law enforcement component of their job is the last thing on the list that they do during their day. Yeah. And so, as we move kind of into this brave new frontier of school safety and how we're addressing it, I'm not really sure where we're going to go. I think with a lot of with the social workers and the mental health capacity, hopefully catch a lot of things before anything bad actually happens, get a lot of resources to kids who really need it before we need to have some sort of law enforcement intervention. But there's still a lot of things that law enforcement is going to have to tackle. And I would prefer an SRO to tackle that as opposed to, a patrol officer or a street deputy that now has to come in who maybe just handled of 2 or 3 violent cases, and now they have to kind of put on the soft gloves, so to speak, to talk to a 16-year-old as opposed to talking to a 40-year-old convicted convict, right? There's a skill set there that I think is going to be missing.
Yeah, the other thing from my point of view, because I deal with sex crimes, is that many of our cases have come because a girl will admit that her boyfriend's beat her or done something, or they'll recognize the grooming tattoos, the branding tattoos that go with sex trafficking, or the fact that all of a sudden somebody's changed and they're afraid to come to school and they can't sleep, and they're doing a lot of they change their dress, they change their attitude, they might start cutting, those kinds of things. And we get our leads many of the times where they'll come and say, something's going on with this kid and we need an intervention. And you're not going to get any of that frontline safety stuff without a school resource officer.
Correct. And it's a bit out of the job description of your average, police officer or deputy sheriff who's showing up, because those school resource officers have that extra training to recognize those signs, to understand, when some of these kids may have fallen into abusive relationships, may have fallen into where, for the one student is really the victim and the other student is really a suspect, and be able to determine who that person is, what's the appropriate course of action, really, so that way all parties can get help, right? I mean, if you're 15 or 16 and you're already in an abusive relationship as the perpetrator, there's some help and there's some things that need to happen to understand what healthy relationships are versus obviously the person who's the receiving end of that.
Yeah, and there's something to be said for having that same person there day in, day out in a uniform with authority that has a measured response that you can trust. And, to have some stranger law enforcement just show up and take a report and leave, you do not have that kind of trust or bonding.
Well, and it's interesting, like you say that too, especially for teenagers, as opposed to it being, an officer off the street. Hey, this is Officer Jones, and, you need to talk to Officer Jones. The majority of SROs I know use their first name. Hey, it's Officer Adam. Hey, it's Officer Joe. Yeah. And it's a known personality, and a lot, they're reaching out as a bit of a customer service type aspect to being an SRO, to engage with the kids, to be that face that they know they can trust if they have a problem, or if they're concerned about something.
Yeah. So we're coming to the end of this segment, but just in a short question, if I can, is how many kids, when you train them, believe that it'll ever happen to them? I know when I deal with social media exploitation, they're all sure it's not going to ever happen to them.
This is a scary fact. I thought all these kids were going to be like, nope, never going to happen. The answers we get is really mixed. I almost want to say it's 50-50. Some of these kids have already said, hey, yeah, I've experienced this type of thing in my neighborhood by, drive-by shootings, living in gay neighborhoods. Hey, I've had to, do this already in, maybe the country that I came from when I was younger or before my parents moved over here. So the kids who have either had to use these types of strategies or have been in some sort of situation is far greater than I ever thought. Yeah. So, and again, you still have half the kids that, grew up in good neighborhoods that they don't really think it's going to happen. But again, they're seeing it in television. They're seeing these videos of kids their age in places not that far away. And coupled with the fact many times they've already been in lockdown on a real life, they've had to lock down because the police are in pursuit and they're searching for someone in their neighborhood, or there's been the threat of violence. So these kids have already, in a non-drill aspect, already had to lock down or have experienced in their neighborhood. So it's a scary fact.
And the threat can come by social media and nobody see it but them.
Exactly. That's true.
That's one of the things that we're seeing with various apps that are coming in, that these kids talk amongst themselves and there's kind of this band of silence. And so you see a change in mood and approach, but you may not realize what's happening. Exactly.
And it's so important. One of the things we talk about is that very thing. Look, everyone seems to know something was going to happen except for the teachers, right? It's like everyone else knew. And, understanding to trust your gut, to say something to that trusted person. And if it's that trusted SRO or a trusted teacher, you got to tell someone to start the wheels in motion. So that way we prevent a crisis.
Yeah, I wonder how much stuff will not get reported now because it's not an SRO, so you don't have that front warning.
Yeah, that's going to be a scary statistic that we're not going to know the answer to, I think, for a few years.
Yeah, probably. Well, this is Opal Singleton of Exploited Crimes and Technology. Our guest today is Adam Coffrin, a retired or at least former police officer, is deep involved with an organization called Safe Kids, teaching kids all about active shooters. And it's our pleasure to have him. We have one more segment here, so stay with us and we'll be right back.
Custom Service Systems, a proud supporter of Million Kids, is a family-owned and operated commercial cleaning company servicing the Inland Empire and surrounding areas since 1974. CSS takes pride in their ability to maintain the business facilities they serve and their long-lasting relationships with their valued clients. CSS provides a variety of cleaning systems customized to client needs, including deep cleaning and disinfectant to be COVID-19 compliant. From basic office cleaning to windows and floors, CSS will clean up your mess so you don't have to stress. Custom Service Systems cares about families and communities and wants to give back. Custom Service Systems are proud supporters of Million Kids to keep kids safe from predators. If you need the best cleaning services for your business or corporation, contact Custom Service Systems at cssclean.com. Again, cssclean.com or call 951-781-9345. That's 951-781-9345. You will know you found the best. Custom Service Systems.
Hello, this is Opal Singleton of Exploited Crimes and Technology. Let me tell you about my friend Doris Anderson at Remax Realty in Upland. She is amazing. She's kind, she's patient, but she listens. And she's informed, and she will help you with your real estate transaction in a way that works for you. Doris, in full disclosure, often supports the work of Million Kids because she cares about young people. But she knows how to analyze a market, how to market a property, and how to find just the right transaction for both buyers and sellers. If you're looking to buy or sell real estate or invest in income property, contact Doris Anderson at Remax Realty 951-733-8899. That's 951-733-8899. 951-733-8899.
This message is all about Million Kids, the organization that helps locate missing kids throughout Southern California and educates to keep kids safe from predators. Million Kids educates school administrators, teachers, parents, and teenagers how predators identify a potential victim and the methods they use to recruit innocent kids. BMW of Riverside is a proud supporter of Million Kids. Visit BMW of Riverside at the Adams Street exit off the 91 freeway or click bmwofriverside.com.
AM 590, The Answer.
Hello, this is Opal Singleton of Exploited Crimes and Technology. We come to you every Saturday at 3 o'clock on AM 590, The Answer. I so much appreciate each and every one of you that come up and tell me you never miss the show, or that you share the show, or that you found out about me because you were driving down the street and bored and didn't have anything else going in your life, so you turned on the radio and then got hooked. So I appreciate that a whole lot. We so much appreciate all of you that share this show. If you have others that you would like to have listen to the show and they're not in our listening area, they can simply go to am590theanswer.com. That's am590theanswer.com. And all these shows are archived at millionkids.org. Well, our guest today is Adam Coffrin, and he is with Safe Kids, Inc. And he and I were talking at the break. One of the things that we'd really like to talk about is how the social media changes our kids and the way they process threat, the way they process crime. We're now aware, of course, so many of them have been distance learning, maybe coming back to the campus, but many of the campuses have gangs on them. They have kids trying to do drugs behind the scenes and like that. And it seems like everybody's on a cell phone, and some of them have naked photos. So with that, Adam, I just want to get your input. What's it like when you talk to kids, and especially active shooter? There are so many things our kids have to deal with that we never had to deal with. So how does that work in approaching them psychologically?
Well, it's a whole nother level of stress, essentially. You know, I tell people, when the majority of us were growing up, if you were bullied or there's something embarrassing or, there was a fight after school or something, that was it, right? It was the kids that were there that were privy to the information. And, you had, maybe someone passed a note or whispered or something, and that was it. There's nothing that I did in my educational career that is somewhere online for people to see, right?
Right.
Whereas today it's completely different. Essentially their perception of a lot of social media is at face value. It's reality. I can trust this person who tells me they're another 13-year-old girl when in fact they're a 38-year-old, predator. Right. There is so many ways to manipulate data, information, and then where kids are receiving it. They're not going to CBS.com or NBC or any of these other news outlets.
That's right.
And watching, they're getting it on TikTok, on, all the different. The second that adults discover a platform, they're out of there because it's for old people and they're on to the next one. And so, the providers of information are not vetted sources. They're not, oftentimes, professional journalists. It's opinion, it's rumors, it's a number of things that, kids begin to crystallize their information, their sense of reality around. And whether it's, when Instagram really took off and it was, these people are, posing this way or posing that way and everything looks perfect. Well, when in fact, as we all know that, the majority of television and movies is all facades. None of it's real. It looks real, but it's not. And this seems to have cut down that facade layer to much closer to real life.
Yeah, the converse of that, too, is that things, number one, never go away. And two, they can spread like wildfire in ways that in our world we'd never been able to comprehend. And, all it takes is one mistake and your life has changed for a very long time. And suddenly you're very famous for something you don't want to be famous for. And you feel very betrayed and you don't know how to go about dealing with that. And I would guess that's even true back to your active shooter thing. You get people that do a lot of animation. One of the things that was fascinating to me, I studied Pornhub was the largest porn site in the world. They've just taken down 10 million videos because they're being sued every way to Sunday. They lured almost 10 million subscribers, and many of them minors, into believing that they can make $40,000 a week doing amateur pornography. Well, it's turned out that's called child porn, and they're having to take down a large number of that. But these kids send these photos believing they're really not going to go anywhere and they're really not going to do anything. But the same kind of thing in animation, this animated video game character pornography makes everything seem like it's okay and it's not real. And of course, in animation, in the video games, there's a lot of killing. There's a lot of shooting that goes on. And so trying to teach a child how to process the reality world versus the animated world, and then getting the social and shame-based implications on it is really an interesting time in our society.
Well, it is. And, you die in a video game or something, there's a reboot, right? You start over, you get more lives, right? Whatever the case is. What we saw was interesting. There was a study done a few years ago by East Coast University. And they took a machine and that measures brain activity, and they stuck this machine on these kids' heads and they gave them, graphic, violent video games. And they said, ready, set, play, right? Play for as long as your heart's content. And so you have 3, 4, 5, 6 hours of gameplay where these kids are, Call of Duty or Battlefield and all these different things. And what they discovered is after not that long of gameplay, they found things like, hand-eye coordination increased and decision-making increased and all the things that, you'd have to do in any sort of strategy game. But the scary thing, what they found decreased was the empathy centers in these kids' heads. Yep. Losing the sense of empathy that they killed somebody or that they threw them off a bridge or whatever the scenario was. Right. And, there's a lot of controversy in the research world is that a direct carryover in the real life? Are these kids carrying over the concept that, if I pull this trigger or if I push this kid over the ledge or if I do whatever, that it's going to be like a game. Right. And the only thing we really truly know is that if you lose your sense of empathy for others, that is a slippery slope to a lot of other problems as well.
Boy, is that true. That is really, really true. I couldn't have said it better. That's a fascinating thing that you've just put together there. Our guest today is Adam Coffrin, and his organization is Safe Kids, Inc. And Adam, tell the folks, what can our audience do to support your organization and get involved?
In the school setting, the stakeholders, I always say, are the parents. It's the folks listening with kids that are in a private school or a public school, any educational center, especially now as we slowly begin to hopefully get back into school for some of us and others that, maybe have their kids in private schools and they've been back for a while, is, bring what we're talking about to their principals, to their district, understanding that, hey, there's programs out there that that we can have critical conversations, teach life skills, and what we kind of say, close that circle of safety, close the circle. You got fire and earthquakes and all this other stuff. Let's bring around the human aspect to this, to close the circle, to understand that, hey, we need to teach our kids a host of different things. Yes, they have to learn math and science and all the things, but also let's give them some very basic life skills. And taking the concept of the program, and I think, especially moving on and over the course of the next year with kids coming back in mental crisis and, the projections that, violence is going to increase on campuses. We've already seen an increase in violence in our neighborhoods and kind of in the world if you're watching the news. Yeah, no kidding. Let's give them a skill to feel a little bit safer. There's tools in which we can talk about it in a way that is empowering and not frightening. And to bring it to your schools as the parents saying, hey, I think it's important for our kids. I think it's important for our campuses to stay safe in all aspects. And that's really, really one of the ways that folks can really help us the best.
So get the parents to go to the school and say, we want to have safe kids come in and do an active shooter training.
Yeah. Hey, we want this curriculum. We want the
hero.
The hero program. Yeah. We want, essentially our kids to be a hero, right? I mean, we want them to have these hero-like skills. So that way they can stay safe and our teachers are safer and to, kind of help bring the campus together in these conversations of safety. Mm-hmm.
Well, that makes sense. Well, Adam, you've been a pleasure to have on our show. I so much appreciate the work that you're doing. I appreciate the mindset in the way that you go about educating people on a very difficult subject. It is not easy. I live in this world, and you want them to be aware. You want them to protect themselves. You don't want them naive. Neither do you want them traumatized. And I read over your organization. I love the HERO program. Makes all the sense in the world to me that our kids need to be educated in this kind of thing. And so I admire the work that you're doing. Coming out of law enforcement, you really are taking on a tough one here, and you're doing great. So with that, we're going to begin to close out. If you want to reach Adam, you can always contact him at, Adam@safekidsinc.com. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, our website, safekidsinc.com. All of our social is at safekidsinc. Operators are standing by, so to speak.
Okay. And if you call now, no, anyway. That's SAFEKIDSINC, Safe Kids Inc., and his name is Adam. Adam, I so much appreciate all that you've done and sharing your information, and also the fact that you care greatly about kids as we do. My name is Opal Singleton. This organization is Million Kids. If you have it in your heart to donate, please go to millionkids.org. I'm going to ask you one time, put your arms around your kids and your spouse. Tell them you love them. Tell them you're proud of them. And we'll see you next Saturday.
Societal Shift, A World Without Borders and a Home Without Walls. This is the most important book you will read this year, especially if you have children or grandchildren. We are living at the most important time in all of history. In 2020, the entire world will be connected by internet, more than 6 billion people coming together. Technology will provide many great advantages for our kids, but a world without borders for our kids is also a world without borders for pimps, predators, pedophiles, cartels, and organized crime. It is a home without walls because 87% of the kids sleep with their phone. It is the greatest societal experiment of all time. Our kids are technology geniuses, and their parents are technophobic. Some are techno-impotent. New apps come with no warnings on how a predator will use them against our kids. Advancing technologies like encrypted messaging, vaporware, artificial intelligence, cryptocurrency, and the dark net will challenge law enforcement, teachers, and parents to keep kids safe. Recent research states that 9,000 kids a day are being blackmailed with a naked photo, and 58% will meet their predator. It is indeed a societal shift, and one in which most parents are unprepared. If you are a parent or grandparent, teacher, counselor, or social worker, please take time to read Societal Shift. Only $18.99 plus $6 shipping. Order today at millionkids.org. That's millionkids, millionkids.org. It'll be the greatest gift you can give your family and yourself. Order Societal Shift today. Million Kids takes checks and credit cards. Opal Singleton, the author, will personally sign the book and send it to you. Again, go to millionkids.org and order Societal Shift today. Join Million Kids. Keep our kids safe from predators.
Hello and welcome to Exploited Crimes and Technology. My name is Opal Singleton and we come to you every Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock right here on AM 590, The Answer. This show is brought to you by Million Kids. It is not 1 million kids, not 10 million kids, just simply million kids. And that is because more than million kids are trafficked each year throughout the world. That would be human trafficked. We serve as the training and outreach coordinator for the Riverside County Anti-Human Trafficking Task Force. Yes, Riverside County has a task force. In fact, not just any task force. They have an amazing group of men and women. Well over 10 of them now. We doubled in size. I'm very proud of our sheriff down there, Sheriff Chad Bianco, and making an investment, and also our board of supervisors and our district attorney for making all that happen. And they're doing the same thing over in San Bernardino County. I don't report to them, but I work with them. We had the Fontana Police Department on not too long ago, and in fact, that's how I met the guest we're about to have today. So with that, I'm going to get started right off the bat. We are excited as we can be to have a guest, and his name is Adam Coffrin. And with that, welcome, Adam.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for having me on the show. And it's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, I wouldn't miss it after seeing your resume, and we had to do this. Anyway, Adam, tell the folks all about yourself, who you are, what you've been doing.
Yeah, it's been a kind of interesting career path. I started out in law enforcement, so it's funny how you talk about your connections with law enforcement and the sheriffs. I spent just shy of 20 years in law enforcement in Orange County. Worked a variety of assignments, everything from the street patrol to training to all kinds of different specialized units. And one of those units I was in was tasked with stopping school violence and really more specifically active shooters. And that was, shortly after Virginia Tech, when a lot of agencies realized, the first people there won't be the SWAT team. It won't be, some of these special teams. It's going to be the first couple of cops who show up are sheriff's deputies. And so we created a very specific team that was tasked with stopping these types of events before it got any worse. And that's kind of where my career led me ultimately into the organization now is, how do we connect with, how do we talk with, how do we stop not only school violence, but how can we impart some knowledge and some abilities to kids to help protect themselves?
I would agree. So let's go back to your active shooter information here for a minute. I've been to a couple of those presentations, and I'll tell you, I'm pretty tough because I work in human trafficking, but I came out of there shivering. I was like, whoa. So how do you teach children what to do in an active shooting situation?
Well, that's, like million kids, that was the $1 million question. For so long, and I'm guilty as charged is, we would teach active shooter or, violent survival from a police officer mindset or a military mindset, right? Scary videos, very scary topic,
I sat through a couple of them. Made me a believer.
Exactly. And you're subjected to scary videos and scary 911 calls. And again, there's all a learning purpose, but it's usually for those folks in that industry, right? If you're a police officer or someone, you're used to seeing those images, and that's how we're used to train. But that's not for kids. It's definitely not for educators. And so we really set out a number of years ago to how can we take a very, very scary topic and how can we make it age appropriate, not only for kids as it really is young as kindergarten and even younger, but also for their teachers and for the rest of the world that doesn't live in the tactical universe that, police officers and military folks live in.
So how did you do that?
That's a great question. So it was a bit of secret sauce. We early on decided, hey, we can't go this alone. We just can't be, experts in law enforcement and tactics and do this in a vacuum. So we brought a team together. We brought educators in to the discussion. We brought school psychologists in. We brought parents in, and we said, hey, how can we do this so it's trauma informed, it's age appropriate? We're gonna and we really start with empowering kids. How can we approach the subject as empowering and not frightful or not anxiety inducing? And that's really so the organization and the whole concept of Safe Kids came from that that core and finding a way to discuss and making teachers and parents who are not subject matter experts in this having the ability to talk to their kids about the topic.
Boy, I couldn't agree with you more, Adam. Honestly, I go through that when I started to say to kids, how do you talk to kids about sexual exploitation? Because especially in a public school, some of them might have been violated this last week sometime. And yet you do need to be able to make it clear enough. You need to make it age appropriate enough, but you don't want to traumatize a kid, and on top of it, I don't know about you, but every kid I've ever spoke to is sure nothing bad's ever going to happen to them on the internet, that they're going to be able to spot a what do you call that? A catfish, kind of thing. But, and so in my case, I'm very similar to yours. Even though we've never met, it's all about making them leaders, making them influencers. And, one of the things that's so special to me about talking to teenagers today is they're the most important generation that will ever live, has ever lived at this point, because they're the generation alive as the entire internet is brought together. So by the very nature that this generation, it won't be uncommon for them to have 5 million followers in the future. And how do you teach them to live in a world without borders? And in fact, I have a movie coming out about that this summer. But that's why for you, back to your active shooter, that's just so powerful to empower them, give them that leadership to teach the next generation, and also make it so that they have some sense of control.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned this generation. When we were going through our pilot programs for high school, we found something very interesting. And after the program, we had a student focus group, and these are high school sophomores and juniors and seniors, and they're obviously active in their school. And as we're discussing what do they think of the lessons and the concepts, there was something brewing in the room. There was an uneasiness in the room, and I thought it was about the topic, obviously, because we're kind of dissecting the topic. And this high school sophomore, she goes, "Look, I got to come out and say it. Look, we're the generation of active shooters. We're the generation that's facing this type of violence." And she looked at me and she looked at the teachers and said, "And you don't get it. You didn't grow up under this type of fear of I'm not going to go home at the end of the school day."
Yeah. Let me jump in there. That's one of the things that I think myself when I often speak is that the internet changes our perception of events. In other words, when they bomb something now, they don't just bomb it and run away. They bomb it and film it. So you're living it live, kind of thing. And if there's a shooting, it's filmed. And so it changes your sense of predictability. And your young lady is absolutely right. It changes your perception of an event because you're participating in it, even if it's in Paris or off in Nevada or some other place, it feels like it happened to you.
And they're seeing, their peers, the kids that are their age, not that far away in this country, experiencing this type of thing. And she goes, look, it really brings it home, watching it on all those outlets. And, as parents, you try to block the news and show to your kids as much as you can. But like you said, the internet and all these devices has brought the world younger and younger.
Yes.
And these kids may realize, that they might not know what, but they understand that something is going on, that, their parents' behaviors and what they're seeing, there's something wrong.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I often will say also that this generation will have more information than any generation ever before them, but they will have less truth. How do we teach kids to figure out who to trust when you don't meet them, or who to believe when you receive information from them? Even with video, as you know, they're getting video to a point where they can add in images in live streaming and take images out in live streaming. How do we teach our children to understand that?
Well, in the lessons that we have for our younger age group, we start with a Venn diagram, people who hurt and people who help. And teachers start with that discussion of who are helpful people and who are not, helpful people, who are harmful people, and who are sometimes the folks in between. And it's interesting to see, a kindergartner or second grader's perception of good and bad, so to speak, in very simple terms at that age, and how much it can be skewed by what they're seeing on the television, what they're seeing on the internet. And again, sometimes it's truth, sometimes it's half truth, sometimes it's, it's what they've been led to believe in the household. And it's like you said, there's so much information to this generation. And now at these young ages, they're trying to decipher it all. And it's daunting.
Yeah, and then you add in animation where they, I had kids tell me sex on the internet's not sex and killing isn't killing. And I had one church group tell me that sin on the internet wasn't sin. And I thought, I wonder how that's going to work out for them. Anyway, our guest today is Adam Coffrin, and his organization here is Safe Kids. And we're coming up against a break. We're going to get deep into what his organization does at the break here. So stay with us. We'll be right back. This is Opal Singleton, A Million Kids. Be right back.
Societal Shift, A World Without Borders and a Home Without Walls. This is the most important book you will read this year, especially if you have children or grandchildren. We are living at the most important time in all of history. In 2020, the entire world will be connected by internet, more than 6 billion people coming together. Technology will provide many great advantages for our kids, but a world without borders for our kids is also a world without borders for pimps, predators, pedophiles, cartels, and organized crime. It is a home without walls because 87% of the kids sleep with their phone. It is the greatest societal experiment of all time. Our kids are technology geniuses, and their parents are technophobic. Some are techno-impotent. New apps come with no warnings on how a predator will use them against our kids. Advancing technologies like encrypted messaging, vaporware, artificial intelligence, cryptocurrency, and the darknet will challenge law enforcement, teachers, and parents to keep kids safe. Recent research states that 9,000 kids a day are being blackmailed with a naked photo, and 58% will meet their predator. It is indeed a societal shift, and one in which most parents are unprepared. If you are a parent or grandparent, teacher, counselor, or social worker, please take time to read Societal Shift. Only $18.99 plus $6 shipping. Order today at millionkids.org. That's millionkids, millionkids.org. It'll be the greatest gift you can give your family and yourself. Order Societal Shift today. Million Kids takes checks and credit cards. Opal Singleton, the author, will personally sign the book and send it to you. Again, go to millionkids.org and order Societal Shift today. Join Million Kids. Keep our kids safe from predators.
Hello, this is Opal Singleton of Exploited Crimes and Technology. Hey, there are many good restaurants in the Inland Empire, but really great restaurants are hard to find. Let me tell you about the Toasted Barrel in Corona. It's a trendy, upscale steakhouse with great pasta and seafood. It's a fantastic choice for birthdays and anniversaries or just that special night out with your loved one and friends. Inland Empire magazine has awarded them Best Restaurant and Brunch for the past 3 years. The owners, Ed and Shirley, are friendly and attentive to your needs. If you're a prime rib connoisseur, this place is for you. Go ahead and try it out. The Toasted Barrel, located at 1300 El Sobrante Road in Corona. Or Google them at Toasted Barrel to make reservations. I guarantee you, you're going to love it. Be sure and tell Ed and Shirley that Opal sent you. It will be a night you'll never forget.
Real estate sales in the Inland Empire are really hot. Sellers and buyers recognize that these low interest rates will not last. Sean and Colleen at Caldwell Banker Armstrong Properties in Riverside are proud to sponsor this show. They are the best in the Inland Empire. They're fair, honest, creative, and they care about you and your situation. If you're in the market to buy or sell a home, call Sean and Colleen at 951-529-4066.
AM 590, The Answer.
Hello and welcome back to Exploited Crimes and Technology. This is Opal Singleton. I'm the host of your show. I hope you'll follow Million Kids at millionkids.org and get involved with our organization. Get yourself educated. Go on there and sign up for Million Kids Insider Alert. About 3 times a week, I take a case, in this case, local cases, several of them, and analyze them for you and some of the new technologies that are out there and some of the new kinds of crimes or changes in legislation. So they're only about 5, 7, 10-minute videos. You can sign up for them at Insider Alert and you'll keep yourself educated. Well, we have the true privilege today of having a guest. His name is Adam Coffrin, and he works with an organization called Safe Kids. And he started out with, he's law enforcement. He started out doing active shooter programs for kids in school. So with that, Adam, I'm going to turn it back over to you. Tell us a little more about your programs.
You bet. So as we looked at, okay, how do we talk about this subject with teachers and kids? we thinking about, the methodology of teaching and curriculums and that type of thing. We said, we might be doing this backwards, essentially allowing or having, trainers train the teachers, and now the teachers are responsible for all of safety on campus and making the right decision at some of their, probably the worst day of their lives at some of the most critical moments to keep their kids safe. And the younger they get, the harder they are to kind of put, it's like herding kittens to some degree, right? And so we said, hey, could we do this and make it to where we can help these teachers and not just give them a video or training course? So we developed what we called the HERO program, and HERO being a kind of a catchy acronym for hide, escape, run, and overcome. What we want to do is
hey, I kind of do that every day.
Right. I think most of us can find at some point during the day we're overcoming obstacles, or we're hiding from something, or we're running away. But we wanted
every time I turn on the TV, hide, escape, run.
Exactly. One of the things that we want to do is find very simple language, very kid-friendly and educator-friendly language to teach really this life skill, not just for active shooter, but we look at violence in its totality, and understanding, what hiding means, versus a lockdown, or, how to overcome something as opposed to fighting, those types of challenges. So it was creating a curriculum. It's a series of lessons that's taught from their teachers to their students, kindergarten or high school seniors, in a fashion in which they can have critical conversations. It's a safe environment to do it. It's using empowerment theory and some other teaching and psychological theories to help these kids work through what should be a very scary topic, and the end of the day, allow them to have tools, allow them to have some strategies that make them not only feel safer, but be safer.
Mm-hmm. I think back in my lifetime, and we just really don't, as an adult, have a concept of what it's like to be in a building and then suddenly realize that building could be invaded. And yet we send our kids off to a school where that does happen more often than we would like to think. And it's true even in public buildings. I of course, myself, I work with law enforcement. Whenever I do enter a room, I especially at a bank, by the way, first thing I look around when I go in a bank is first of all, if you can get in a bank today, but if you're in there, I'm like, okay, which desk am I going to hide under if this goes wrong? Especially since all these people are wearing black masks in a bank, so it's a little bit unusual, but you don't really think about how a child might perceive the fact that every day we send them off to an environment that might go wrong, and you never know when it's going to happen. And so that is a fascinating thing to teach. So what kind of response do you get from kids when you start your curriculum?
It's really, when we first started this, and, we've been now coming up in our 6th year of doing this. And when we first started, we wanted to do no harm. The last thing we want to do is to trigger any children or any teachers or to build anxiety or cause more problems than we were solving, which, if you follow along in this area, there's a lot of research showing that, hyper-realistic drills and some of these things is actually doing more trauma and more psychological harm than good. And we're like, how can we reverse that? How can we kind of flip it on its head? And so that was our first concern. And what we heard from the first series of kids that went through it all the way to now with, tens of thousands of kids through it, is that they feel safer, is that they feel they're a stronger advocate. They
have some control.
We put some control back in their hands. We gave them very simple, easy things to do. When we all grew up, we had fire drills, right? I'm a Southern California native. I remember duck and cover, right?
I know. And I was raised in Kansas, and for a tornado, they would have us get under our desk and cover our head. Good luck.
Right?
Hey, we're not Dorothy and Toto anymore, baby.
Right? And so, for a long time, we've been talking to kids about things that can hurt them in life. And, fire drills you do every single month, right? And now as an adult, like you said, you walk into a bank, and only because of your privilege of working with law enforcement and those folks that are already in that mindset, you've picked up on some of the habits and things that you almost subconsciously do.
Sure.
And we wanted to be able to have kids, like, how can we give them the same skill without thinking about it, without them being fearful of it, just like they would a fire drill, an earthquake drill, anything else, to where when they're in college or when they're an adult, and something happens in the workplace or in a building that they're in, that they can react in a manner that will help them get through that situation, and not be paralyzed by it, essentially.
So interesting. How do you think that this differs in talking with, for instance, one of the things of course, I've got a different kind of specialty here, but there's a big difference in my talking to middle schools. Of course, they're prepubescent, although in today's environment, they seem extremely knowledgeable. And then dealing with teenagers. What do you see when you deal with a traumatic situation like this?
Well, we kind of break those age groups into four very distinct categories, which is, kind of the kinder through third grade age group, the fourth and fifth, sometimes sixth grade age group, the middle school, and then the high school, because they all have very different ways in which they can react, they can think, their capabilities, whether you're about a 3-foot human or a 6-foot human,
Right.
And all those different things. And what we discover is that in the younger kids, it's superheroes and villains, and they're fearful, but it's okay. It just essentially gets them to be able to not be paralyzed by fear, and that they can listen to directions, and that they know they can do some things. Mm-hmm. The older that gets, they become a little bit more creative in some of their questioning and some of the things that they want to do, the questions about these types of events. But also, this is the age group that, proportionately speaking, is the perpetrators of violence on campus. And in the older groups, we also have a conversation of recognizing trauma and crisis and being able to prevent some of these incidents by understanding the mindset and what's going on before any of these types of things happen, and try to prevent them before they ever happen. And if we miss it and they do, then we know still how to be safe then. Mm-hmm.
What kinds of crimes and crisis do you see on high school campuses, for sure?
That's a broad question. But I will tell you, pre-COVID.
And we're running out of time. So.
Right, exactly. So to really break it down very succinctly, pre-COVID, we saw everything from microaggressions and violence, whether it be some sort of domestic violence, whether it be a good old fashioned, fight after school over who knows whatever. But more and more ramping up to gun violence and knife violence, and the type of violence has the propensity to hurt a lot of people. And the planning, of planning through an attack like that, planning who they're going to hurt, what the revenge is, what the problem is. The attacks became a bit more sophisticated, in recent years, and that led to obviously a lot of concern to try to maintain safety and security in some of these campuses.
Mm-hmm. I question that, and the reason for my question is one of the things that I read this week that just scares me to death is Los Angeles is laying off 150 school resource officers, and my experience is that'll be just catastrophic.
Yeah, it's a balance of everything, right? I mean, law enforcement really became the bucket of a lot of different topics for a long time. Everything from mental health to social emotional well-being. The officers got saddled with a lot. Well, and not always in the most appropriate fashion. So is there a balance? Sure. Should we be adding more school psychologists? Absolutely. More crisis intervention? Absolutely. But there's a threshold of which you still need a certain amount of police officers in order to keep, law and order, safety, all those types of things, regardless of how many programs you have to try to prevent and mitigate these types of things. So, yeah, my fear is that LA Unified is going to be a little bit to a lot understaffed, especially with the challenges that are going to be facing them as students return and the crisis that they're looking at ahead of them.
Yeah, the other thing that I read recently was that especially in LA County, there are thousands of kids that are not necessarily missing, but nobody knows where they are because they don't log in. And so it's almost like you've let the herd out of the barn, and now you got to try to gather them all back up again. And it is an interesting time in our society. Our guest today is Adam Coffran, and his organization is Safe Kids. And for the most part, they train in active shooters, but he also works with at-risk kids. My name is Opal Singleton, and this show is called Exploited Crimes and Technology. We are coming up against the break, so I hope you'll stay with us, and we're going to be right back. Hello, this is Opal Singleton of Exploited Crimes and Technology. I want to tell you about a book I wrote called Seduced, The Grooming of America's Teenagers. It's all about how predators access, groom, recruit, and exploit our young people using social media, online gaming, video chat rooms. Technology is changing at the speed of light, and we have to understand how to keep our kids safe from predators. So you can get this book by going to www.exploited, millionkids.org. It's $16. I'll sign it and I'll ship it to you personally. We hope that you will order this book, educate yourself about how to keep our kids safe in this day of changing technology. Join us each Saturday for our radio show at Exploited Crimes and Technology at 3 o'clock on AM 590, The Answer.